Good afternoon. My name is Ed Bernard, and I serve as the chair of the Financial Accounting Foundation. I'd like to welcome our stakeholders who are tuning in to today's meeting. Today's meeting will include reports from the FASB Chair, the GASB Chair, and the FAF Executive Director. We'll also receive a report of the latest activities of the Financial Accounting Standards Advisory Council and a report from the Trustees Standard Setting and Process Oversight Committee. Before we get to those reports, I'd like to take a moment to recognize 4 new members of the Board of Trustees appointed last November. Lara Abrash, the chair of Deloitte US, Luis Aguilar, a former SEC commissioner who served from July 2008 through December 2015, Pratt Bott, former chief accounting officer and corporate controller for Cisco, and Paul Quincy, global head of equities for JP Morgan Asset Management. Please join me in welcoming our new trustees. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Lara for agreeing to fulfill the role of co-chair of the Standard Setting Process Oversight Committee alongside Trustee Manju Ganeriwala. There are also 2 reappointments to note, both to the Private Company Council. We will welcome back both Michael Chung and Katina Curtis, whose second terms will officially begin January 1st, 2026 and conclude on December 31st, 2028. Now with that, let's move to our regular agenda. The first item of business is to approve the minutes of the board's November 19th, 2024 meeting. May I have a motion, please?
I move the minutes be approved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And now we'll move to the reports from FASB, GASB, and FASAC. Rich, you want to start?
Great. Thanks, Ed. Good afternoon. Please find a copy of the fourth quarter chair report in your materials. I wanted to spend a few minutes to update you on our fourth quarter and early 2025 activity. During the fourth quarter, the FASB issued exposure drafts on 7 topics, including accounting for software costs, accounting for government grants, and accounting for environmental credits. We also issued final accounting standards on our disaggregation income statement expense project, as well as induced conversions. And we've also issued an additional exposure draft in early 2025 related to our ongoing codifications improvements project. When you look at our technical agenda, an agenda that was comprehensively reset as part of our last agenda outreach, you'll notice that 12 of the 14 projects on our technical agenda have had exposure drafts issued and have progressed to or are in the process of progressing to redeliberations. Given the progress on our projects on the technical agenda and the expected timing of completion, a logical question is what's next? We are continuing to use our research agenda to gather additional input for our board as it relates to potential future projects. In that regard, in the fourth quarter, we issued ITCs on financial KPIs and accounting for intangibles. And also in early 2025, we also issued an ITC on agenda outreach to enable our stakeholders to tell us what they think should be the FASB's priorities moving forward. We look forward to that input from our stakeholders. We've carefully considered the timing of the release of all of these documents, their scope and comment periods, so that our stakeholders could provide us with the input we need to create high-quality accounting standards. While we placed a priority on getting these documents out into the hands of our stakeholders, we also used extended comment periods to make sure that all of our stakeholders have an opportunity to review those documents and provide us input. That includes comment periods that go as long as 6 months. We look forward to speaking with our stakeholders. And just as a reminder, while we do appreciate formal comment letters from all of our stakeholders, we are willing to engage with them in any manner they find appropriate, which includes discussions with our teams and our board members. So on behalf of the board, I thank you for your continued support, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Rich?
Hey, Rich, you talked about your agenda outreach and getting input on what the updated agenda will be in the ITCs, invitations to comment. What sort of time frame is it likely to be when the refreshed agenda comes together?
Sure. So the ITCs on financial KPIs and intangibles I believe have comment periods around the May timeframe. The agenda outreach goes through June 30th. Likely the output of all of those will come back to our board over the succeeding 12 months. That's what we did with the last agenda outreach. We had a goal of trying to bring all of that information back to our board within a 12-month period. We're going to embark on a similar initiative. We will talk about all the input we received on those ITCs in public meetings so that stakeholders can see how their input was factored into how our board decided to set an agenda.
Got it. Thank you.
Other questions for Rich? Manju?
Rich, you've mentioned and talked about the ongoing effort related to the CECL standard. At this juncture, do you have a feel for if your PIR would result in any changes to that standard?
So a couple things. We do have an active project on our agenda related to acquired loans that we'd already issued an exposure draft on and that we're in the process of redeliberation. So that's going on now. When you think of the PIR, it's got two benefits. One is the potential improvement to a standard. The other is improvement to our standard setting process. We're certainly listening to feedback we're receiving on CECL. Any decision to do future standard setting would be a decision of our board, but we are keen to hear whether or not that standard is providing stakeholders with relevant financial information to make capital allocation decisions. To the extent that our stakeholders identify areas where they think improvements needed, and we as a board decide to move forward, we could always do future standard setting.
Any other questions for Rich before we move to GASB? Seeing none. Joel?
Thanks, Ed, and thanks, everybody. Great to see you. Always appreciate time to present what we have going on at the GASB. My report is in your materials. The highlights are we had a busy fourth quarter, maybe not quite as many documents as the FASB, but we did issue at the very last day of the third quarter, was released early in the fourth quarter, a preliminary views document for public comment on our infrastructure asset project. The comment period extended over about 110 days into early mid-January of 2025. The comment period is closed, but like the FASB, we always continue to get letters in and we'll talk to anybody about that project, which is ongoing, but we did get 65 comment letters spread among an array of our different stakeholder groups. So we really think that that's good feedback and the board is starting our work and working our way through that. We will or are having a series of public hearings in which 17 of those respondents have agreed to participate in dialogue further about their views with the board. We actually have had 2 of those hearings already over the past 2 weeks, and the final one with 7 participating groups will be tomorrow. And then we will, on Thursday of this week, have a user forum where 6 to 7 user stakeholders will get together with the board and dialogue about that proposal. Additionally, during the middle of the fourth quarter, we issued exposure drafts of a proposed standard on subsequent events and an exposure draft for an update to our implementation guide. Those comment periods extended into late January and mid-February of this year. In addition, at the end of the fourth quarter, we approved amendments to the technical plan to take 2 projects that had been monitoring activities and bring them into the plan. One being the project that we've talked about with you numerous times on our taxonomy, moving out of monitoring to its own new type of project, which we call a technology project. That's titled the Voluntary Digital Financial Reporting Project. And then second is the cybersecurity risks disclosure project that our GASB prioritized highly for us, and we had been monitoring. We have advanced to pre-agenda research. Finally, our post-implementation review on Statement 72, fair value measurement and application, was presented to the Oversight Committee yesterday and is at this point considered final and will be released very shortly. With that concludes my summary of my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Joel?
Joel, I have a question for you. So the couple items you mentioned that are moving from monitoring onto the next stage, can you just kind of talk through what does the board consider as you evaluate, these work efforts and how do you advance the project from one stage to the next? What are the criteria?
The criteria is presented by the team. The team in the monitoring have developed information about the project, its prevalence, impact on different stakeholders, maybe some of the things that existing guidance relates to that. They'll accumulate that and bring it to the board, and the board can then undertake, cost benefit wise, does it seem like this is a significant potential improvement to the financial reporting? What's the case for change? How prevalent is it to governments? And then we'll move it forward to either obtain more information for research or sometimes go directly to a standard setting project.
Thank you.
Other questions for Joel? Manju?
Joel, you mentioned about the voluntary digital taxonomy project, that GASB is undertaking to develop taxonomy for government financial reporting. Can you discuss how this intersects with the FDTA, and what impact any potential delay with the implementation of FDTA might have on this project?
Sure. Thanks, Manju. As part of this project, we have been paying attention to the Data Transparency Act and how the federal government is progressing with that. But the project was really born prior to FDTA, or kind of came out at really the same time. And our view is that this project is important no matter what. So we are moving forward. We're monitoring FDTA. We're communicating with the SEC in particular, which is where the municipal securities part of the FDTA rules would come out. So they're interested in our project, and we're communicating with them and have meetings set up with them routinely. But any delays, or really kind of no matter what they do with FDTA, we think this is important as a voluntary effort at minimum. And so we will continue on, and we're making good progress.
Great. Any other questions for Joel?
I have one, Ed.
Oh, Marion, thank you.
Joel, another GASB priority that you've referenced before is a project regarding cybersecurity risk disclosure. How does the GASB think about the scope of cybersecurity disclosure that is appropriate for financial statements as opposed to other types of public disclosure by governments?
Yeah, thanks, Marion. It is moved to pre-agenda research, and as part of the pre-agenda research, we're really going to be looking at what are those disclosures that exist now, requirement-wise, from other agencies, what voluntary disclosures, cybersecurity risk disclosures are governments doing, and really thinking about is it appropriate for external financial reporting and disclosure, and then is that an appropriate place for cybersecurity risks? We've moved it to research to explore those and kind of accumulate a paper for the board to consider, because the GASB told us, they ranked it second highest in their priorities, told us it was an important issue. So I think we're certainly very aware that I think the board doesn't want a project that results in boilerplate disclosure that really isn't of any use to users of the financial report, but also doesn't want to require disclosures about cybersecurity risk, which can be very sensitive and add to risks for governments. And so we're going to be looking at ways in which, if there are any, we could kind of hit that sweet spot in the middle, but that information will come to the board. So that's what we're looking at, but we're certainly aware of those concerns.
Thanks, Joel. Any other questions for Joel? Seeing none, our next report is from Mike Morrow, Chair of FASAC. Thanks, Mike.
Good day, everyone. Thanks for listening to my comments. My report for Q4 can be found in your materials. Last fall, you received my Q3 report. I'll just briefly on our Q3 activities, but go into a little more detail on Q4. In our September meeting, the first topic was disclosure effectiveness and process, including potential ways to improve disclosure effectiveness and whether there is a holistic approach that the FASB could use to consider disclosures across multiple topic areas. The second topic was the aforementioned agenda consultation, where FASAC gave input on potential topics that could be considered as part of that. Moving on to our December meeting, the first topic was on the FASB interpretive process and the Emerging Issues Task Force. Council members received an update on the recently reconstituted EITF and got a little background on its operating procedures and process. Members inquired and provided observations about the current role of the EITF, including communications about its agenda decision process. The second topic was on financial key performance indicators, KPIs, for business entities. During that session, council members discussed and provided input on the FASB's invitation to comment on KPIs. Overall, council members highlighted the increasing relevance of these KPIs, indicated that financial KPIs are an important tool that companies and investors use, and noted the lack of comparability and consistency in financial reporting between companies that may be reporting the same financial KPIs. Council members also provided diverse views about how the board should address KPIs. Some council members suggested that the board pursue a narrow project that focuses on the most frequently reported financial KPIs, while other council members supported an approach that would focus on requiring companies to disclose information about commonly used KPIs to increase transparency. Finally, some council members suggested the board consider the outcomes of the recently issued disaggregation standard to determine whether a project on KPIs is needed. The third topic in that meeting was on the FASB's post-implementation review process. During that session, council members received an overview of the FASB's PRR process and provided observations on the current process and activities and the recently completed revenue PIR report and the ongoing PIR projects on leases and current expected credit losses. On Thursday, February 13th, we held an orientation session for 6 newly appointed FASAC members. On Monday, March 3rd, we will have our annual administrative session for all members, which includes a self-review of our operations and effectiveness with the goal of always trying to improve. And at our upcoming FASAC meeting on Tuesday, March 4th, the topics are going to be a session to consider consistency in accounting standards, an update on the leases PIR project, and the derivatives scope refinement project. And on just a note, as I've done every year since I've been in this role, in January, I met individually with each board member and the FASB technical director to discuss our operations and future meeting topics that they would find most worthwhile for FASAC. That helped to fill out this section you see in your materials about our future agenda, which is always a bit of a fluid agenda, if you will, because we try to be reactive to whatever the current needs might be. But as always, I found those sessions with the board members most informative, and I thank them for their time and great input that they gave as part of that. So that's it. Glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for all that you do. Any questions for Mike? Okay, our next report will be from the Oversight Committee. Manju?
Thank you, Ed. The Standard Setting Process Oversight Committee met yesterday, Monday, February 24th. We received informational reports from FASB Chair Rich Jones and GASB Chair Joel Black. And as we do at each meeting, we discuss meetings that trustees observed in the past quarter. In yesterday's meeting, trustees Rick Reisig, Brian Lewis, and myself, and FASB liaison to the PCC, Sue Cosper, shared our collective observations of the PCC meeting that took place on December 16th and 17th. In addition, we heard from Trustee Beth Pierce on her observations of GASAC meeting on November 12th, and from Trustees Brian Lewis and Beth Pierce on their meeting observations of the FASAC meeting on December 5th. The committee and its participants engaged in an excellent discussion on several important topics. For any stakeholders interested in viewing a recording of yesterday's public session, you can find this on the FAF website. With regards to GASB update, we received report from GASB Chair Joel Black and Director Alan Skelton. They reviewed the main highlights of the fourth quarter. Many of these matters have already been covered in GASB Chair Black's report during this session, so I won't go into it anymore. But I did want to highlight one thing. A primary topic reviewed by the committee included a thorough summary of GASB's draft final report for the fair value standard post-implementation review, which has received the committee's review and input and has been shared with the full board of trustees. FASB update with regards to the report received from the FASB Chair Rich Jones and Technical Director Jackson Day. They discussed the FASB's progress in the last quarter. Again, many of these matters have already been covered in the FASB Chair Jones report during this session. A primary topic reviewed by the committee included an educational session on FASB's agenda consultation process, which provided a timely and comprehensive overview of how the FASB collects, analyzes, and responds to and prioritizes stakeholder feedback. Rick and Jackson also reviewed the next steps associated with the FASB's most recent agenda consultation, which started in the fall of 2024. And with that, Ed, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Manju. Any questions, Manju? John, our last report is from John Auchincloss. John?
Yeah, thanks, Ed, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm going to give a brief update on our 2025 budget. Shortly after our Board of Trustees approved our 2025 budget in its meeting last November, we submitted the budget to the SEC for its review that the FASB's accounting support fees are consistent with the requirements of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And I'm pleased to report on January 17th, the SEC in fact issued an order confirming that the proposed accounting support fees for FASB for 2025 do meet these requirements. So we will begin working in line with our usual process with both the PCAOB and FINRA to begin the assessment and billings of our 2025 FASB and GASB accounting support fees. In addition, I want to note to the audience that we will be posting the details of our 2025 budget as well as of the FASB's and GASB's accounting support fees on the FAF's website. I'd like to remind the listeners that the FAF voluntarily contributes a substantial portion of our revenue from licensing our content to offset our accounting support fees. Again, the details will be available on our website. Next, I want to give a brief update on all the appointments activity we have going on. The Appointments Committee of the FAF Board of Trustees, chaired by Trustee Lynette Kelly, has a busy year ahead of itself and well on its way to achieving those goals. So, and by the way, I want to join our chair in welcoming our 4 new trustees. It's a pleasure to have you on board. But during this year, we will be searching to fill the vacancies of 5 trustees who will be departing on December 31st. And I want to note that the Appointments Committee does have the flexibility under the FAST bylaws to recommend fewer than 5 trustees for appointment by the full board. In addition, the Appointments Committee will be working to identify our next board chair, as Ed Bernard's term also concludes at the end of the year. With respect to the FASB, the Appointments Committee will be searching for a candidate to replace FASB member Christine Badasan, whose second and final term will conclude on June 30th of 2026, and will be considering the reappointment of FASB member Fred Cannon to a second term, as his first term will also end on June 30, 2026. In the case of the GASB, the Appointments Committee will be searching for a candidate to replace GASB member and Vice Chair Jeff Praviti, whose second and final term will conclude on June 30 of 2026. And as in the case of the FASB, they'll be considering the reappointment of a GASB member, Jacqueline Reck in this case, to a second term, as her first term will also end on June 30, 2026. A lot of terms ending on June 30, 2026. Finally, and as some in the audience may recall, I have announced my own retirement as Executive Director to be effective on September 30th, although I've agreed to stay on to assist my successor with transition through the end of the year. And the Appointments Committee is leading the search for my successor. The Appointments Committee is assisted in these searches by 2 outside search firms and as well as by my staff. And is aiming to complete all of this work by the fall in time for our November trustee meeting, although the appointment for my successor will have to happen a little earlier than that. So unless there are any questions, I'd be happy to take any. I will turn the mic back over to Ed.
Oh, it's quite a report. Any questions for John? Okay, thanks, John. Seeing none, this is the end of the public session of today's FAF Board of Trustees meeting. Thank you again to those of you who have tuned into the webcast. I'd like to remind everyone that the next FAF Board of Trustees meeting will be held on Wednesday, May 21st in Washington, D.C. Thanks very much and have a great day.